Thank you for joining us today and welcome to ChefCon 2021. My name is Heather Payton and I'm a product marketing lead at Progress. And today I'm super excited to be introducing the speakers for this next session, DevSecOps from the palm of your hand on a weekend. With me today, I have Chris Kraus from Krista Software and John Tonello from Progress Chef. This is going to be a really cool session in which you're going to be able to see how conversational UIs and AI can be used in conjunction with Chef to make the lives of IT operators better. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We're recording all of the sessions. They'll be available on demand post ChefConf, and we'll be handling interactions for the ChefConf via the Chef community Slack. My Slack ID there is Heather Payton. So if you have a question for any of the presenters or anything else during ChefConf I can help with, let me know and I'll put you in touch with the appropriate resources. And with that, I'm going to be turning things over to Chris Kraus and John Tonello. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Heather. So we're going to talk about DevSecOps from the palm of your hand on a weekend. So just an overview. We'll talk about Krista and how Krista and Chef work together. We'll do a demo, of course, because everything's more exciting when there's a demo. We'll have questions to wrap up. So what can we whip up here? So statistics tell us that there is siloed data and manual processes all over SOC and DevOps. I mean, literally, Forrester Consulting says people have over 1,100 alerts a day, and they, in most cases, are manually remediated. Which, if you realize, that's a ton, because some of the alerts are just noise, some of them are important, some can be compliance issues, some can be virus issues. And decision makers, actually 77% of them say this has a negative impact of the manual processes on their analysts' ability to mitigate and prevent attacks. So this is huge for just IT in general. It's not just SOC, it's DevOps and everything around our automation. So automation really hasn't changed in IT the same ways it's dramatically evolved in cars. So if you think about on the left, this was the coolest 1990 Lincoln Town car you could get. It had a digital dash, well, partially digital dash, right? But you had knobs for the air conditioner and you had bass controls on the radio. And it had this new thing of cruise control. So you could point and it would just keep driving. It might run into something, you had to steer, you had to use the brakes. You were very much in control and had to do everything yourself. But huge disruptions with driverless technology. So if you look at Tesla, obviously the dash is streamlined. This is high tech. But what you do is you give the Tesla an outcome. Drive me home. And then auto drive picks up. And if it's on the highway, it starts driving. When the car needs you, it asks you something like, hey, there's a lot of construction. Please verify this. Or I'm coming off the highway. Are you ready to take over driving, right? So the outcome of getting you home is handled by the technology in the vehicle, and then the human is assisted when there's decisions that need to be made. So this is really, really cool technology. But we haven't evolved there yet in IT until Krista. So think of Krista as the autopilot for your business. What we want to do is we want to give an outcome to Krista and then have her follow the rules, make decisions, and then when she needs a human for something, ask them for the actual advice. So I'm going to define this as intelligent automation, orchestrating people, systems, and AI. So if we look at what we have in today's market, you've got a lot of collaboration tools, and God knows we all love Slack and Teams and those things, and they're really good at broadcasting messages to people or broadcasting in a channel, right? And it's very much people-to-people communications. Of course, I do get too many of those, so sometimes I ignore them, right? And then on the right, there's a very classic ERP, EAI, B2B communications and RPA. All of that was very system-to-system oriented, right? We wanted to get data between systems at the API level. We wanted to scan a document, have an RPA type it in, but it really didn't include humans. And then the most interesting things happening with our lifetime is this whole concept of AI and ML. The problem is a lot of these machine learning models are literally on someone's notebook. The Python code, those things are there, but there's been no good way to connect people to ask questions of the models and give models access to different systems to look at data to make predictions themselves. So supervised or unsupervised training has been really difficult. Krista is here to solve that. With Krista, we want people, systems, and AI working together in one platform so they can all be part of a conversation and determine how to the best place to get to an outcome. So our approach is very different. So we believe in a conversational approach. We believe you should be able to type a question to the computer system and get a response back. So you can use the Krista UI or the mobile. Maybe you've plugged Krista into your Slack. So think about, Star Trek. It's way out there. Jean-Luc Picard didn't go and start typing stuff when he wanted to talk to the computer or started, file, menu, blah, 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 to get to data. He had a conversation with people, computers, and androids. You never knew. Everybody was speaking the same language, written communications. There was no go to this app, double click this and that. So we want to have a conversational experience with the software. Now, the interesting thing is the problem that most people have with integration is it requires IT to do all the work. So when it comes to changing the business process or changing a business rule or asking person for information, asking system for information, making decisions, that's always traditionally been code-based. Code generators still create code. And Krista is conversational and there's no code authoring. And we find this is the most important thing to have because change is constant in the middle tier. You're always changing your rules, asking what people are doing. Now, underneath that, when you connect to the technologies, this is where the code is because once APIs go into place, they tend to be very, very stable. And, we've implemented APIs, whether against Salesforce or ServiceNow, or say Automate and Chef. The idea is we have IT does those connections, it secures those connections. So this isn't, citizen developer gone rogue. IT is in control of which systems can be connected to, but we want to solve the backlog blues. So if business wants to change a rule, like change the amount of vacation leave you can take, it's just a business change versus coding change and goes onto the backlog itself. So what does that look like? So if we're writing a conversation in the context of a conversation, it's basically between people and systems. So most automation projects fail on maintenance. This is literally a screenshot from Krista. I ask a person, hey, what ranges do you need for your time off? And what's your reason? And then we ask the backend system, get PTO balance. Now, we don't try to teach a human how REST calls work on that. It's literally a conversation the same way. And give me the PTO balance. And then we make a decision. We ask the person if this is okay. Maybe we inform them you're on negative balance or your vacation's been scheduled, or we ask another system to do it. So we want this to be no code itself. So literally what we say is we want to personify the backend systems. So I'm going to play a little video here. So literally the ask a system, we can put a search term here. I'll put opportunity. Because think like Salesforce and Sugar CRM, they have opportunities in them. And it says, well, what do you want to do? Oh, fetch the opportunity, satisfy name. They select the extension. This is implemented by Salesforce. And then the opportunity name was in the previous step to ask a system. Notice I didn't have to learn how to code. I can actually put the rules and the logic and the conversation itself simply in the UI. And that is actually a DSL that's interpreted at runtime. So there's no concept of creating code, compiling code, and working on the back end. Now, what's more important is customers, as they implement this, they are building ever large catalogs of automation that can be shared, whether they're connectors to systems, they're connectors to their AI or third-party AIs. We would definitely want to accelerate adoption across that by making it easy for you to build your automations and share them. So if we wanted to apply this to Chef. So I think storytelling is a great thing. So once upon a time, in a data center far, far away, a QA lab was spun up. So in some cases, that would be a great thing. And sometimes there's problems that happen when a data center spins up a virtual machine. So what would that look like? So I'll ask John to tell me a little bit about what it would look like when Chef Automate picks up that a new machine is spun up.
Hi, everybody. In these screenshots, you're seeing on the left the Automate dashboard after a compliance scan has run, and there's a big red banner, and part of that circle in the left is red, showing, hey, something is wrong and something is not in compliance. But what we've done behind the scenes is not just report it to Automate, but to integrate it with ServiceNow. So on the right, you see actual automate triggered compliance incidents in ServiceNow where they can then be acted upon. And we'll show this a little bit later in a little bit more detail.
Chef Automate detected and then created the incident in ServiceNow. But the problem is that means we're going to end up with a manual workflow. People have to remember, well, what do I do? Do I monitor ServiceNow? Do I get an email? What are all the steps I need to remediate? And do they do the same thing every time? So what we want to do is give that responsibility to Krista. Krista will orchestrate the chef compliance issue. So Automate sends the incident into ServiceNow, and Krista is monitoring that. So a workflow can be started by a human or a business process. And then Krista picks up the ServiceNow incident, creates a JIRA ticket, and notifies DevOps, hey, this has happened, please look at it. DevOps needs to review this and say, we need to categorize this and pick a recipe to apply to it. And in some cases, that means you may have to talk to a manager. Sometimes you may need to turn off a print server to resolve. Other times we need to do a Windows patch and apply patches and reboot and those type of things. So if we want to do an out-of-bound update, we need to talk to a manager and say, hey, we're going to bring this down. So obviously we're talking about a QA machine on the weekend, so we'll probably say, yes, let's go in and do an out-of-band reboot. And then Krista will ask Chef to do its part, infrastructure to do its part, and EC2 to do its part. So this could be literally calling APIs into infra to say, please apply this recipe. Maybe we SSH into machine to do something. There's tons of things we can do to EC2 to provision or reboot things. But the idea is we put the responsibility of that checklist of all those things that you want to do in Krista versus making a human do them manually. And then at the end, we want to inform people what's happened. So we'll inform the VP of development. This has been remediated. We've updated the JIRA ticket with the details. And then the most important thing is we saw an incident and a categorization happen. That all that data from the conversation is saved, and we want to apply that into machine learning. So every time you build a manual process, we want to figure out over time, can we have some, say, supervised learning of that and start building machine learning so maybe we don't have to ask a person to do that the next time.
What we're looking at here first, and what I'll take you through, is sort of some of the mechanics of what Chris has just described. And specifically, we're going to talk about Automate and the interface a little bit, the ServiceNow integrations. We'll take a quick look at some of the code to remediate this particular problem, and then we'll return it to Chris to show how this integration is able to be automated through Krista. One of the first steps in setting up anything is actually one of the first steps is actually to set up ServiceNow. And here's what I've done: gone into the settings of Automate, provided the link to my ServiceNow instance, provided some credentials to do a Chef infra scan report. Anytime a Chef client runs on any of the member nodes anywhere in my estate, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, that will report them to ServiceNow. These are easy to create, give them a name, and actually ServiceNow is just one of the choices you have. You can also do webhooks or Slack, but for this case, we're using ServiceNow, picking the type of failure, in this case, an incident or a Chef client run, providing my credentials, and entering it in there. Pretty straightforward and basic. And once it's complete, any activity that's happening on any node is going to show up. Here's a Windows 10 node, for example, that I have among a small set, and you can see the infrastructure of it is fine, but it is not in compliance. A scan that's running to check for the print server being turned off and disabled is not true on this particular node. As Chris said, this is a QA node that fired up when we ran all our Chef compliance and recipes on something else. So at this point, you can see the reports have gone into ServiceNow automatically, providing nice range of information. They give the node name, the test details. You can look at the profile itself. The profile is the print spooler. That's what it's called in my profiles, in my chef cookbooks and in profiles. And there's even a link there that I can look at it and automate to see what the problem is. To get a little deeper into the code, right now we're looking at a very simple recipe that tells Windows to stop and disable the print spooler. This follow-up, this is a profile for inspect that says, hey, make sure it's not enabled and make sure it's not running. And I've enabled this through inspect. I'm working on Chef Workstation here. And some attributes that tell it to report this particular incident type and failures of this cookbook to not only automate and CLI, but further into ServiceNow.
So what we see here is when the incident shows up in ServiceNow, it triggered a conversation in Krista. So we got the incident number, and we started pulling some details on the incident itself, like what was the description, which actually has the full link into the details behind it and the short description. We also created the Jira ticket automatically. And so by looking at it, we can say, okay, this is a print spooler issue. So we've got some recipes pre-configured. There are things happening locally. So we're presented with two options. I can turn the print spooler off or request update and reboot. So I'll go in and do an update and reboot. And what it does is I went to a second browser. So it went to the manager for approval. They've got the details. They've got the ticket in Jira. They've got who sent it. So the idea is we've integrated people into our process itself. That person, the manager, can open it up, look in Jira to see, okay, yep, there's a ServiceNow incident. There's what it is, some details. And as the workflow keeps progressing, it'll keep updating it. So we have two options. We can either request a reboot or wait for the next reboot. So we've now given actions to the backend system to get the recipe applied and do the reboot. And what we'll see in the other browser is the person who started the process is notified. Here's the actual automation in Krista. You can see it's a simple conversation between people and systems, and some decisions are made there. So if I go into wide view, you can actually see that it shows you the view of it. So you can see there's the decision tree. We can see there's the print spooler, and the decisions are made itself. So it's very easy. This is what a mere mortal would actually be editing if they ever wanted to change this process itself.
Now we're going to go back and pick things up in Chef Automate. When I go to compliance, I can see red turn to blue, and that means everything is compliance. In compliance, you can see the blue line picks up where the red drops off. I can see that all of my profiles, including the disable print spooler, which is a critical test I have, is also blue. Everything is good to go. Now I'll turn things back to Chris to wrap up.
So what did we see? So Krista implemented or orchestrated across teams, tools, and AI. Because remember, the decisions made in there were actually saved, and those are used for structured learning. Krista became responsible for notifying people, asking for direction we needed, and then taking action. API calls in to automate, to request things to happen. API calls in to reboot and say AWS. And the idea is we want to reduce the overall IT workflow and increase productivity. Because certain of these things we have to do over and over again. So we want to have a decision and have all the menial tasks of applying cookbooks and that applied automatically. This will really help improve quality and reduce rework with our automated workflows itself. So the idea is our conversations are outcomes that we want to use to start building our training models for ML. So if you can imagine, you could be on your mobile device and gone through this conversation and say, I've identified it. This is a remediation action. Krista does remediation. Well, if you keep doing this over and over with, say, these print spoolers across your estate as things come up, machine learning would detect that and do the categorization, and then can actually suggest which action to take. So over time, we can learn from the people actions and then make suggestions. And then when we're confident, we can actually have the ML decisions take over itself.
Hey, great. So, great demo. I think we had a couple, a quick wrap up here. We can go ahead, and then I have been receiving some questions during the presentation that we'll go ahead and address here in a sec. So, just as a quick takeaway, if you're looking to learn more about how to get started with Chef Infra Server and Automate, we know how we have a lot of infra users out there that may not be using Automate extensively yet. This is a great reason to finally start checking it out. We have a great getting started guide that John put together. And for those looking to learn more about Krista, totally recommend hitting the Krista software site. Tons of great information, webinars, and demos out there, including this Why DevOps Stops. So with that, then we'll ask the John and Chris to come back on screen, and we'll go ahead and take a few questions here. Let me go ahead and review these questions that we've gotten. Okay. So, Chris, a question came in during your presentation. I can see Krista Conversation. Can I see Krista Conversation in something other than the browser?
Yes, so there are mobile apps for iOS and Android, but you can also hook it into something like Slack. So we have customers who say they use Slack, and Slack will give you basic conversations. When it gets to like a structured text where you want to use like radio buttons or interesting or things like that, it opens the browser or the other app. You can also wire it into WhatsApp. So the idea is you want to be able to have that on multi-mediums itself. So let the channels be open, but don't force people to learn how to navigate menus and things like that.
Cool. Looks like we have a couple questions regarding integrations, of course, right? So one, John, what's involved with the Chef Infra Server Automate ServiceNow integration at a high level?
What's happening behind the scenes, there's actually a ServiceNow plugin that's readily available that you can add to any ServiceNow implementation. And what it gives you are sort of pre-configured hooks into Automate. And so when you go into Automate itself, as you saw in the demo, it's a simple task of adding a particular URL and your credentials, and the handshake happens and the information begins to flow. So it's very easy to set up initially. There's not a lot of hoops to jump through it at all, and the integration can work across whatever infrastructure you have. In my example, I have some cloud instances and I have some on-prem VMs. I even have a Raspberry Pi. All that stuff can report in.
Cool. So there's another question here regarding could you integrate this workflow in like a CI/CD system like Jenkins or Azure DevOps?
Yes. So there's actually pre-built extensions in Krista, and the idea is you have a conversation start build, and that could either be pointed to Jenkins or maybe another build tool like Azure or TeamCity. So the idea is the conversation is start build, but then the implementation, that lowest level, will point to different build systems for you. So yes, we do that all the time.
Awesome. Just another question here. How long does it take to like implement Krista and kind of get started with Krista?
Oh, good question. So it is SaaS oriented. So basically you're going to be provisioned your tenancy in the cloud. So that's easy. Don't worry about installing a bunch of things. And then your conversations are usually a matter of like hours to a day when people build the conversations to connect to systems. And the neat thing is they can be done in test mode. So you can actually run your conversations and not maybe have your build server connected or Automate connected. It'll go on and run and give you mock data back and forth so you can figure out what you want. And then you wire up the extensions to the systems themselves. So we have out-of-the-box extensions, and then in some cases, customers may have, say, proprietary systems their own. And so that's a like hours to day effort to actually say call your REST calls, or maybe you need to do an SSH into machine or SCP files somewhere, that type of stuff. So that extension can be done in Java, but that's literally hours to days when you have your custom systems along with what we have in our catalog.
And on that, I'll put both of you on the spot. So John, what do you think would be other possible use cases between Chef and Krista that you can see?
Wow, there's so many opportunities where when you think of the kinds of incidents that are being reported across your systems, it could be an outdated version of some particular app that you don't want, and you can remediate that anywhere or not. You could check also for dependencies, you don't want to blindly upgrade a package, and you could set up a scan to show those kinds of variations and even show some dependencies that then Krista could know about through that integration and give you real choices on what to do next.
And then, so Chris, one for you. What is one of the most interesting use cases you never saw coming you're seeing someone doing with Krista?
It was actually onboarding of employees, because it's an amazingly complicated process. It's like you get an employee, but they need a phone, they need a computer. Well, that computer better have Chef on it and all those things set up so that you can monitor it, right? And then they need to get their insurance, and then they need to put it in the global catalog, and then there have to be, based on your organization, permissions. But you don't want to just blindly give permissions. You want to give permission to specific apps these days. So actually employee onboarding to go everything from HR to IT systems to hardware, and make sure the hardware is provisioned the right way with all the right infrastructure on top of it, is actually a really cool thing, because it's something that happens all the time. And there's different rules for contractors and employees. And no one remembers that checklist, and they'll forget something. So putting the responsibility or the checklist in Krista to accomplish that is a great use case.
You guys could probably make a pile of money if you could figure out how to do that for kids going back to school with all the forms and such that need to be filled out.
Yeah.
I think we've all been through that, if anyone is a parent. So anyway, just great presentation. We're at the event end time. I want to thank everyone for joining us and listening in today. If you have a question, ping me in the Slack channel. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close this call. Thanks now.